This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. There's a lot to talk about in this video, so let me just get started. The first thing is I collectively had another, like, sometimes you know something, but then something happens and you like, oh yeah, that's what the truth feel like. Like, that's what it actually is, you know, because you can mute how much you hate a football team until you see them do something embarrassing and it brings the whole city joy. Brownstown been in the depths this week, man. We've been mad, sad, and been giving up on the season. And then the Steelers dropped that loss. 2 back-to-back losses to 2-win teams, by the way. They dropped that loss on Thursday Night Football to the hapless New England Patriots, who, by the way, couldn't score 6 points against the Los Angeles Chargers last week. A defense that's been very porous, to say the least. They only put up 18 points. They lose, and man, it wasn't just that Pittsburgh loss. It's how that ship went down, man. Them fans was chanting for Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph. Hey, I said this to Steeler fans years ago. Because Steeler fans, because most of them in their life have not went through a true period of quarterbacklessness. They don't understand what Browns fans understand dearly. If you ain't got a quarterback, this whole thing can go away like that. This whole play like a Steeler, be a Steeler thing that y'all been riding off of, it can go away like that. And what we saw was a performance that you could only characterize as something you would have saw from the pre-2018 Browns. I know people are drawing parallels to the Browns having 7 wins and the potential of them losing out to what the Browns did in 2014. I don't think those parallels are valid. The reasons I don't think those parallels are valid, if you look at this team, even with the injuries versus that team, this team is much, much, much better. There was no Myles Garrett on that team. There was no, well, I mean, you had Joe Hayden, but Joe Hayden's not Denzel Ward. Well, maybe he was close at that point. Still, the point remains, this team's much better. You have a much better team. You have a much more experienced team. You're not playing Johnny Manziel at quarterback. That's the biggest difference, right? I would say Joe Flacco and DTR feel like better options than Brian Hoyer and Johnny Manziel. So I don't really think that's true. But Pittsburgh, on the other hand, now I don't think they're going to lose out. They're going to find a way to get to 8 or 9 wins. We know this about Pittsburgh. Don't let one game fool you. Mike Tomlin ain't going to be terrible for the rest of the season, but that is a mess that they got over there in Pittsburgh. A absolute messaroni that they got there in Pittsburgh. Straight up, it's just a mess. Mitch Trubisky is terrible. Kenny Pickett is terrible. And Mason Rudolph, I'm pretty sure is terrible, because we said the same thing about Mason Rudolph that we said about the other 2 quarterbacks when Mason Rudolph was in there. The best thing you can say about Mason Rudolph right now is that his numbers compare favorably to Kenny Pickett. You know who else's numbers compare favorably to Kenny Pickett? Cody Kessler. Yes. 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 Which brings me to my other point. Let me ask you a serious question. Do you think the Steelers have a better quarterback room than the Browns did in 2016? Serious question. Browns had Josh McCown, Cody Kessler, RG3, and I believe Kevin Hogan, I think you would take 3 of those 4 quarterbacks over everybody on Pittsburgh's roster right now. And here's the problem with Pittsburgh that they have to be careful about falling into. See, I was talking about this with UCF Jaguar, and that video is going to drop later today. If you remember, you already got access to it. But I was talking about this with UCF Jaguar, and like, hey, when you see these franchises like the Colts or like, Green Bay or Pittsburgh, who never really had to want at quarterback, those fans and the people covering that team don't really understand what it takes to get another one. Take stability in your organization, so Pittsburgh's going to have that. But also it takes you being aggressive. Like, you got to take a shot at a quarterback. Browns fans know this better than anybody. Same thing with my guy UCF Jaguar, who, again, video's coming out later. If you remember, you already got it. But Browns fans know this. The Browns lived in quarterback hell for 20 years. Not because they were incapable of taking a good quarterback, not because no good quarterbacks were available to them in the draft, but because the Browns kept punting on quarterback and trying to get cute with it and trying to be cheap with quarterback and trying to, move the quarterback burden down the line, right? We don't need to draft a quarterback in the top 5. We'll draft somebody in the 20s. Like the Steelers did with Kenny Pickett. We don't need to draft the quarterback in the first round. We feel like we can get a quarterback in the second round, like the Steelers will probably do this year. We don't need to draft the quarterback this year. We're going to sign a veteran, like the Steelers will probably do with Kirk Cousins or something like that. You don't solve the quarterback problem by not being aggressive. Say what you want about Tim Couch and Baker Mayfield, and people have said what they've wanted about Tim Couch and Baker Mayfield. Those, like, if you go from 99 to 2020, those 20 years, Baker Mayfield, Tim Couch, of all the quarterbacks that played from 99 to 2020, those were the 2 that you had the best shot at being a franchise quarterback with. Those are the 2 that you feel like, hey, they might have been something if we developed them properly or if things would have broke right for them. It's debatable whether that's the truth, but they're the closest you came. That's not debatable. They came a lot closer than Seneca Wallace. They came a lot closer than Jake Delhomme. They came a lot closer than Trent Dilfer or Jeff Garcia or Charlie Fry. Do I have to continue? Colt McCoy? Brandon Whedon? See, franchises like Pittsburgh, they learned the hard way. You can't get cute with quarterback. You can't think, I'm going to slide to 22 and get this guy back. If a quarterback is available 9 times out of 10, because Lamar Jacksons do exist, but let's be real, Lamar Jackson was available at 32 for reasons other than football, and it's not because he did anything off the field. It was just people had their prejudice about him, right? People wanted to say he was a wide receiver, a running back, or something like that. Nobody was trying to evaluate him as the football player that he was. So that's not a reasonable expectation that quarterback can fall to 32. 9 times out of 10, when you're drafting a quarterback in the 20s, shit don't work out. It don't work out. Most of the time, you got to hit a quarterback in the top 10. You can get lucky and get a Pat Mahomes at 11 or at 10. And when people bring that up, Quincy, you're wrong about this. You don't need a top 5 pick to get a quarterback. Pat Mahomes went number 10. Sure. Should Pat Mahomes have gone number 10 in that draft, or did everybody lose their mind? Like that, the GMs being stupid in a given year, that's not a strategy to build on. Like, if Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson are in the same draft and they happen to go 10 and 12 because GMs just overthought it, that's not something to rely on. If you want to get a quarterback, you got to get a top 5 pick. A top 5 pick, or you got to trade all your picks for somebody who's already good. And that's not even a guarantee. We're living that in Cleveland right now. So, for Pittsburgh, I tried to tell y'all where this road was headed. Browns fans, we tried to tell Pittsburgh, hey man, this is a bumpy road. Put your seatbelt on. Don't get that excited about the preseason. We're trying to tell you Kenny Pickett feels like everything else that we've seen, that all of your quarterbacks on your roster feel like everything else that you've seen. I know you think it's the offensive coordinator. We fired Brian Daboll because he couldn't get nothing out of Colt McCoy. I don't think Brian Daboll was the problem. I'm just saying. Pittsburgh fans, we tried to tell you this is where you were going. We tried to tell you, put your seatbelt on. You didn't want to listen to us. You wanted to call us bums. Say we didn't know what we talk about, even though in this subject, sorry quarterbacks, oh boy, we know what we talking about. We got references. People are debating right now in this comment section whether Kenny Pickett and Cody Kessler is a good comp. Because some people are going to be like, nah, man, he's more like Connor Shaw. Nah, he like Thad Lewis. Actually, he reminds me more of Charlie Fry, a local kid who didn't work out. Like, there are a million comps Browns fans can go with Kenny Pickett because we've had Kenny Pickett on our roster hundreds of times. Like, we know what Kenny Pickett is. We've had that kid on our roster many times. You can name 5 different quarterbacks off the top of your head that were as good as Kenny Pickett for the Cleveland Browns because that's who Kenny Pickett is. Also, when it comes to first-round quarterbacks, we got to stop assuming that just because they were drafted in the first round, that it's automatic that they can be Kirk Cousins. It is a rare outcome for a quarterback to get drafted and be Kirk Cousins. Baker Mayfield was drafted number 1 overall. He ain't even Kirk Cousins. We always do this with draft picks. Hey, man, as long as they can be Kirk Cousins, as if that's an easy outcome, it's very difficult to be Kirk Cousins. We all understand the limitations of Kirk Cousins. You can't win a championship with him. Still really hard to get a guy as good as Kirk Cousins. Most quarterbacks, if you hit on one, like here's the range for quarterbacks. Most quarterbacks that you draft in the first round end up being Sam Darnold. That's usually what you get. If you pick an especially bad one, Josh Rosen. If you hit the average, a slightly above average quarterback in the draft, you probably get Teddy Bridgewater, Geno Smith. And if you hit a home run, then you get a double or something like that. This metaphor fell apart. But once you get the Kirk Cousins and then actual elite starting quarterbacks, like, nah, man, that's hard. It's really hard to do. It's not common. But that's where Pittsburgh's going. So I just want to spend the first 12 minutes of this video laughing at Pittsburgh. But the Browns do have some legitimately great news coming down the line because we know that guys have been coming back all week, right? We've done the injury report video. Another piece of injury news that dropped. Amari Cooper is back at practice. Look, I didn't think this was a possibility. I thought if Amari Cooper missed practice yesterday, he was done. He was going to be out. He practiced today. It's not a guarantee that he plays on Sunday, but the odds went from 20% that he's going to play to about 60, 70. So he could play. It's very likely. Now, on the flip side of that, I think it's 100% Trevor Lawrence is playing on Sunday. I would be very shocked at this point if Trevor Lawrence does not play Sunday. I think he's playing. I think this is similar to the Myles Garrett thing, right? Where people thought Myles Garrett could be out for the year and then he was back at practice like nothing happened. Yeah, it's similar to that. So that's the injury update. I wanted to laugh at Pittsburgh, talk to y'all about Amari Cooper coming back from practice. David Njoku also back, but nobody really was worried about him missing the game. Coop was the one guy that you were worried about missing the game that was on that injury report. I know they send out that injury report. It has 13 people on it. If you watch that injury report every week, you know that there's like actually 2 people you need to be worried about on that injury report. And Coop's playing at this point. Even if DTR clears protocol, he's probably not starting over Joe Flacco because of the time to prepare. We'll see what happens next week. But that's my thoughts on this whole thing, the Browns news, and also laughing at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hope y'all enjoy it. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.